I have been dreaming about the day where I could finally experience what it's like to game on an OLED monitor. I mean, getting to experience those super deep blacks and amazing contrast, to the super vibrant colors and amazing HDR, to the super fast response time of OLED. But up until this point, I just haven't been able to stomach the pricing of the OLED and QD OLED market. But all of that is changing thanks to the release of the Pixio PX277 OLED Max. And this is an extremely impressive monitor for the price point. So it's a 27-inch 1440p 240 hertz OLED, and it comes in at just $700. Now, yeah, $700 is not a little amount of money when it comes to buying a monitor. But when you look at the rest of the OLED and QD OLED market, even the super high-end IPS market, this is an extremely well-priced monitor. So overall, you're getting an amazing list of specs, plus some really, really cool features and functionality built into the monitor itself. So when it comes to the specs, of course, it is 1440p, 240 hertz OLED. But besides that, you're also looking at a 0.03 millisecond gray to gray response time, HDR10 capabilities with a 400 nit peak brightness, and a max peak brightness in HDR of 1000 nits. You're also looking at adaptive sync functionality. When it comes to colors, you're looking at 137% sRGB color coverage, 1 billion colors. You're also looking at 1.5 million to 1 contrast ratio. So yeah, it's got all the things you'd expect out of an OLED monitor. But yeah, before we jump into the actual performance testing of all those specs and also going into the features and functionalities of this monitor, I first just want to show you guys what comes in the box. So once we get the panel out of the way, we can actually see what else comes included inside of the box. So of course we do get the included monitor stand. It comes in two pieces like you'd typically expect. You get the arm and then the base. Base is extremely heavy, completely metal arm as well. So very nice construction there. It's got two dowels on the base plus a hand screw just to tighten it together. We also get the external 180 watt power brick, which keeps the back of the monitor a little bit cooler, keeping the power supply components outside of it. We also get an included DisplayPort 1.4 cable plus our USB connection in order to power the built-in USB hub that is a part of the monitor. And if we take a look at the monitor itself, once we get it all unpackaged, like really well packaged, nothing's going to happen to this panel in shipping. But as you can see with the base, like it's just the two dowels plus the one thumb tightenable screw. So no screwdriver or anything needed there. Just tighten that down and you're good to go. And then in terms of getting it all installed, it's as simple as just sliding it in, locking it in place, and you're all set. So overall, you're getting everything that you need inside of the box to get right up and running with this monitor right after you purchase it. And just as Pixio is throwing in a lot of accessories into the box, they're also adding a lot of features and functionalities to this monitor. And first things first, I kind of want to start by looking at the inputs and outputs of this display. So in terms of port selection, we're looking at dual HDMI 2.0 plus a DisplayPort 1.4. So you can connect 3 devices to this monitor right there. But then Pixio also added a USB Type-C 3.1 port, capable of both video into the monitor plus 65 watts worth of power delivery. And then there's also a USB hub included on this monitor. So you get an additional 2 USB ports that can either be used over that USB-C connection or be used by the device that you have the USB connection plugged into. And there's a built-in KVM. So depending on whether you're using the Type-C output or you're using your display, either like DisplayPort or HDMI output, then the monitor will actually auto switch the keyboard mouse that you have plugged into the monitor to whatever device you're using, the Type-C or the device that has the USB hub connected to it. Extremely, extremely cool functionality for this monitor. So port selection, extremely impressive with this PX277 OLED Max. And Pixio didn't just stop with the inputs and outputs on this monitor, they also included an extremely adjustable and ergonomic stand right in the box. So this thing is built extremely well. And of course you could just mount the monitor to any VESA adapter, either mount it to a wall or mount it to a desk mount. Super, super convenient when it comes to that. But the included stand is really good. You get 30 degrees worth of swivel, both directions. You also get 5 degrees of downward tilt and 15 degrees of upward tilt. on the display. You can also leave it in landscape or rotate it into portrait mode. And you also get 110 millimeters worth of height adjustment. So you can pretty much get this thing set up exactly how you need it on your desk setup. So that is an extremely nice to have inside of the box with the included stand. And Pixio didn't just focus on the functionality of the stand and the monitor itself, but they also put a lot of thought into the design and aesthetics of this thing. Like, it takes into account the capabilities of OLEDs to have these super thin bezels and super thin side profile, which this thing definitely has. But it also does have a pretty thick back when it comes to like the center of the display, just because that's where all the computing horsepower is for this OLED. And in order to reduce the risk of burn-in as much as possible, Pixio definitely prioritized like a thicker back to this monitor to try to dissipate heat as much as they could. So there's a lot of heat sink. The entire back is pretty much constructed out of metal to act as like a giant heat sink to try to draw as much heat out of the OLED panel and into the air, just so that the panel isn't, saturated in all that heat and then leading to burn-in down the line. So they definitely took that into account with the hardware design of this thing. There are also some software functionality built in to the display's firmware to try to reduce the risk of burn-in as much as possible, which we'll cover in a little bit. But overall, they actually added some nice design touches to this thing where it does get a little bit thick. So they added these super nice thin light bars, RGB light bars on the sides of this monitor, just to add that little bit of like, background aura, background glow to this monitor, which honestly looks really, really good. Like, it just ties in the monitor super well. Like, you're not, it kind of does draw your eye to the fact that it does get pretty thick, but it also adds a nice little feature with the RGB to the back. So it's not just like a weird hump on the back of the monitor. It actually has a design purpose and it looks really, really good. So overall, Pixio did a really nice job balancing the functionality with the actual design of this monitor. And you can also tell this thing is extremely well built. Like, when you pick it up, it's extremely heavy. Like, you can tell it's built out of metal. Like, it just feels really, really good and like stiff when you're carrying it around, when you're setting it up on the stand or when you're setting it up on a VESA mount arm. Like, it just feels really well built. So overall, Pixio did an amazing job when it comes to the functionality, the core inputs and outputs of this device, plus the design. But none of that really matters if it doesn't perform how you'd expect an OLED to perform. So now it's time to jump in to the actual performance of this thing. We're going to test it through a bunch of games, make sure that it performs as we expect in, the gaming world, plus the content consumption side of things when it comes to HDR. So we'll take a look at all that right now. So before we jump into the actual testing, just want to show you guys the navigation and the on-screen display. So we have that one joystick style control, and that's it on the back of the monitor that acts as your power button along with the actual control as well. So you have first, display settings, so everything from brightness to contrast, black equalizer. You also have a few different presets for movie mode, gaming, some of those different options that allow you to have, a little bit quick access to, standard settings. And they're all predefined, and you can see exactly what brightness levels, contrast levels, and black equalizer levels they're going to set themselves to. You also have full control over the color on this display. I found it's maybe a little bit on the warm side, so I'll either go cool or user for the color on this thing, but you have full access to all those controls. You also have gaming setup for adaptive sync, game assist like crosshair and FPS mode, and then you also have low input lag. I haven't found the need to use that on this OLED display, but it's there. And then we also have HDR mode, the KVM capability of being able to swap between USB Type-C and then the USB hub to control, keyboard or mouse or anything like that. And then you have all of the OLED care options like auto dimming when it senses that there's not much going on, and screensaver mode to prevent any, burn-in that might happen on this OLED panel. And then you also have some system setup, RGB access or changing the RGB on the back of the monitor as well. So everything super easily navigatable in the on-screen display. And when it comes to color accuracy and HDR, this is a really, really good example of how good this monitor actually is. Like, you can see how deep the blacks are and how just super vibrant the colors are. And when it comes to like the bright, spots on the screen where there's reflections or anything like that in HDR, like the 1000 nit peak brightness, you can really see it, and it just looks really, really good. Like, this is a really good capture of HDR on this monitor. And then, of course, OLED being OLED, you have individual pixel backlight. It looks amazing. Like, there's no bloom whatsoever on this monitor. Everything just looks so crisp. No motion blur, no bloom, none of that. And when it comes to pixel response time, like I mentioned before, we're looking at 0.03 milliseconds of gray to gray response time. So when you look at the alien UFO on the top line, you can see maybe a little bit of a leading edge in terms of the previous frame, but barely. Like, it is so smooth, this monitor, compared to any other monitor I've ever used, even other 240 hertz panels. And when it comes to actual gaming experience on this monitor, I just wanted to do a quick test in terms of just what the HDR feel would be like on this 27-inch OLED panel. So I wanted to test it out with F1 2022, just to get a feel of like what this thing might look like in a less demanding title in terms of just pure FPS. Like, I'm not really caring that I'm pushing 240 hertz in this game, but I want something that looks really good and still gets a decent FPS. So with this setup, I'm running a 4070 Ti, so we're getting right around 100 FPS in F1 2022. Ultra settings, ray tracing, everything enabled, and you can just see how good this game looks on this display. Any other display that I would play this on, except for maybe a TV, does not look nearly this crisp. Even though it is 1440p instead of 4K, it looks super crisp. The colors pop so well, and any reflections or anything with the HDR turned on, it just looks amazing on this display. But when you do want to play a game that maybe does require a little bit more in terms of the FPS and more of that response time style of gameplay, like a game like Valorant, for instance, this monitor can handle it so well. So like flicks, quick scopes, anything like that, you're trying to, get the little micro details of adjusting for a headshot or anything. This monitor is so good at just being able to get all the frame input that you could possibly need. So like, even though, yes, the human eye can't see, 240 hertz, even if it is only seeing 60 hertz, it depends on what frames your monitor is producing that your eye is actually seeing. So if you can push 240 hertz, maybe it's that 230th frame that your eye gets to pick up on, but that's the important frame that you want to see. That's what's so nice about having this high refresh rate type of panel. That's why even going up to 360 or 540 hertz makes a difference. But 240 hertz on an OLED with this good of a response time, nothing feels quite like it in terms of anything that I've ever gamed on. So overall, for $700, I'm extremely impressed by this monitor. It has some crazy unique features like the KVM functionality to swap a keyboard and mouse between a computer and a laptop. Like, some of those things you're just not expecting out of a monitor, even at that price point. Like, $700 is not cheap, like I mentioned, but it is when you're getting this set of features out of a monitor. So 240 hertz, OLED, 1440p, 27-inch, 0.03 millisecond response time. Like, it's everything you could possibly dream of when it comes to a gaming monitor. And for $700, it's honestly a really good deal. So if you're looking to pick up the PX277 OLED Max, there'll be a link down in the description below to pre-order this monitor right now. They're looking to ship them out starting March 15th. So definitely get your pre-order in if you're looking to pick one of these up. If you have any questions or comments about this monitor, definitely leave those down below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, get subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.